Shalom Bethel family. It is Thursday, time once again to talk about last week's Torah portion, although this week I'm actually not going to talk about last week's Torah portion. Last week I had the honor and the privilege to speak at a very close friend's installation at a synagogue called Beth David in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I wanted to share actually my remarks from that installation. We were asked to do a little teaching and give a blessing. And so I taught about the nature of the relationship between rabbi and congregation. And I did that through one of my favorite stories. As a matter of fact, I told a couple of stories. The Rabbi Joshua Ben-Gideon, whose installation I was participating in, he and I have been study partners for 21 years. Since we started seminary together. And there are few friendships that grow as close as the friendships that are created over studying Torah together, meaningful and purposeful and beautiful. And so it was a great, wonderful occasion. I had the opportunity to speak at Rabbi Ben-Gideon's installation for his last congregation 8 or 9 years ago in Madison, Wisconsin. And when there, I told a story, and I wanted to show how our view of the rabbinate has evolved over the years. And so the story I told to demonstrate what it was to be a rabbi at his previous installation was something I learned from my rabbi in Millburn, New Jersey, when I was a student rabbi there, Rabbi Steve Baer. There was a hurricane that was impacting the part of New Jersey where that congregation is. And I got a call from him asking me to come over to the synagogue. So in this driving, hurricane rainstorm, I make my way over to the synagogue, and there he is in the kitchen with his pants pulled up right to his knees, standing in several inches of water with a bucket and bailing it out. And I walked in and I said, "Steve, what are you doing?" And he said, "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm bailing out, the kitchen." He said, "Grab a bucket." I said, "Grab a bucket? Isn't there someone else who could be doing this?" And he said, "Jeffrey, I'll tell you now the most important thing there is to know about your rabbinate. The last line in your contract where it's discussing your responsibilities will have the most important clause. And it says, 'and other duties as required.' Now grab a bucket." And I spoke 8 or 9 years ago about that connection between a rabbi and a synagogue, that whatever there is to do, you do it, because in many ways you are the synagogue and the synagogue is you. And how my friend Rabbi Ben-Gideon so much demonstrated that in the way he approached his pulpit. But this time so the very first time I got to give a blessing to Rabbi Ben-Gideon was at our ordination. And the way we did it was we all broke into pairs and we studied a section of the Talmud, Masechet Brachot, and we divided it up between all of our classmates. There were 18 of us. We broke into pairs, 9 pairs, and we studied each of us a section so that together we had studied all of Brachot. And from the sections that we studied, we designed a blessing to offer each other. And I actually was the one who got to divide up the Talmud, and so I made sure ours included one of my favorite passages of the Talmud. And it was my favorite passage back then because I think it's kind of funny and maybe a little irreverent. But what I realize now, looking at it 15 years later, is actually it's a lot more meaningful than I ever thought it to be. So what's the story? The story is about Rabbi Akiva, the great famous Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yehoshua, his very gentle and very wise and learned and beloved teacher. And what happens is Rabbi Yehoshua one night, he climbs into bed next to his wife, and they're chatting, and they're laughing, and, a little lighthearted banter. And all of a sudden, Rabbi Yehoshua hears a voice come from under the bed. And it says, "Rabbi, what are you doing? We learned from the Torah that you're not supposed to speak lightheartedly with any woman, even your wife." And Rabbi Yehoshua recognizes the voice. It's his star pupil, Rabbi Akiva. He says, "Akiva, What are you doing under my bed? And Rabbi Akiva says, Torahi ulilmod ani tzarich. This too is Torah, and therefore I need to study it. And the Talmud goes on with a whole series of events, students hiding in bathrooms to find out how their rabbis say the prayers, and so on and so forth. But, 15 years ago, when Rabbi Josh and I were being, Rabbi Ben-Gideon and I were being ordained, this just struck me as so funny and irreverent to picture, this old rabbi with a long beard, white beard hiding under the bed, where an even older rabbi with a longer white beard is on the bed with his wife and they're shouting back and forth. I just thought it was so irreverent and funny. But now, 15 years later, looking back at it, I see just how important that story is and how much wisdom there is about rabbi and congregation. So let's start with Akiva, right? Akiva is making an incredibly important point. What he is saying to his rabbi, Rabbi Yehoshua, is that, look, once I'm a rabbi, once you lay your hands on me and give me smicha, I am a rabbi always. I'm a rabbi when I'm in the synagogue, yes. And I'm a rabbi when I'm in the wedding hall. And I'm a rabbi when I'm in the cemetery. And I'm a rabbi all the time. But I'm also a rabbi when I leave the synagogue and after the wedding's over and after I've washed the dirt off my hands from the cemetery or after I've left the hospital. Right? So I don't only need to know how to be a rabbi in these sacred spaces. I need to know how to be a rabbi all the time. My friend Rabbi Ben-Gideon, and certainly I in my pulpit, we try and embody this. We get the fact that we are rabbis all the time, no matter what. When you're a rabbi, there's no uniform you can take off and suddenly you're a civilian. The role of rabbi is ours forever, whether we're in shul, or out for dinner, or out cycling in the mountains or on the city streets, or even when we're at home with our family. There is no place that we are not rabbi, and therefore we need to know how to behave as a rabbi in all those contexts. Akiva is trying to learn, maybe not going about it the best way, but he's trying to learn to be ready and up for that challenge. It is Torah, and he must learn it. The Torah of being a rabbi. But there's another character, and that's so important, and I don't want to belittle that, because that is so important to understand, to really get what it means to be a rabbi. As rabbis, that's where our teaching power comes from, right? It's not the title that gives us authority, it's the being that gives us the ability, the authority, the gravitas to teach what we teach. We are not teachers in a classroom where we walk out of the classroom and then we can do whatever we want. When you are a rabbi, your whole life is a demonstration of what it means to live Jewish. And we need to be cognizant of that all the time because everything we do is teaching. Tremendous responsibility. And that brings us to Rabbi Yehoshua, right? There's another side to this coin. You might think the important character in this is Rabbi Akiva, but no, what about Rabbi Yehoshua, right? This poor rabbi who even in the privacy of his own bedroom, when he's with his wife, is invaded by his student, right? His student sees him as your rabbi all the time. I got a question. I want to know what to do. I need to be there. I need to be there. So while I would assume that in none of our congregations is anyone going to invade our privacy in this particular way, right? He's calling out how it sometimes feels to be a rabbi when you take on this responsibility to be a model of Jewish living and to teach through the way you act and behave. Right? Suddenly, your life is not your own. And worse, sometimes your family's life does not feel like it's the family's own. And your home can feel like less of a sanctuary and a respite and more of an extension of everything else. But everybody needs that, right? Even your private life becomes community property. So how do we balance it? How do you navigate the balance between being a rabbi like Akiva and being willing to allow your life to be part of the Jewish community's life, and not falling into the trap of Rabbi Yehoshua, where you feel like you have no life of your own. And ultimately, that leads to burnout, it leads to family problems, and it's no good comes from it. And that, my friends, is on the congregation. If you have a rabbi like this, a rabbi who really tries to embrace the Akiva model of being a rabbi in all that it is, you're a lucky congregation, right? Beth David in North Carolina is so lucky to have Rabbi Ben-Gideon as their rabbi, who models his pulpit on Rabbi Akiva, who will give every bit of himself, his wisdom and his heart and his compassion and his strength. And I try and do the same thing. Rabbis like us, even when we're away, when we're supposed to be on vacation, when we're exercising, when we're doing laps in the pool, whatever it is, our minds are always somewhere with our synagogue. Our minds are always somewhere with you. Because we can't turn that off. That's who we are. But that comes with a responsibility for our congregations as well. It is up to you to prevent our experiences from being that of Rabbi Yehoshua. It is up to you to care for us, to set proper boundaries, to help us and protect us and our families, to support us and make sure that we are taking the proper time to nourish our own souls so that we have the capacity to nourish yours, to take care of our own families so that we have the capacity to take care of yours. My blessing for every congregation, as my blessing was for Rabbi Ben-Gideon and for the congregation at Beth David, is that we're able to care for each other, to understand that this is a relationship, and it is together through the way we take care of each other and operate in that tight, caring relationship that we can model healthy relationships for the whole community. That together we recognize that Torah hi ulilmod anachnu tzrichim, right? It is Torah, and together we need to learn it. That the world is full of Torah, full of divine sparks that make life more meaningful and purposeful, and that together, right, through that healthy relationship of rabbi and shul, we can discover those sparks and gather them together and create a light that will glow in our hearts and our spirits and in all of our community. And through that light, we will be able to push out the evil that we may feel threatening the world and bring that light to every corner. And that in that love between rabbi and congregation, as that love flourishes, it will be a reflection of the divine love that we are always trying to reflect. I pray that every rabbi and congregation should be able to enjoy that kind of relationship, because ultimately that is the blessing of being together in our sacred communities. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and hope that you have a very wonderful and lovely and beautiful week ahead.